During today's webinar, we're going to review the investment and impact sections of the rubric and the mural board. We're going to look at both of those. And then we're going to give tips on developing an artifact. We noticed that artifacts seem to trip a lot of groups up, a lot of schools up. So we're going to explicitly talk about the artifact creation process and ideas for different artifacts that you can have. And then we're also going to discuss the pitch process and the deck that you're going to use for your competition. So in the chat box, if you have any questions about the investment or impact sections of that rubric, and earlier Esther dropped in the link for where you can find the rubric. It's #1 on the site that she dropped in there. So if you go to the chat box and you click on that, she just dropped it in again, you can go find the rubric and look through the investment and impact sections. If you have, as you're reading those, if you have any questions specifically, or even the earlier one that we talked about yesterday, any questions about what you've been asked to do and what it takes to get like the highest level, which is empowering, please make sure that those are questions you ask today. Also, if you have any lingering questions, like you thought of something after the webinar yesterday, or as you were looking at the board, you thought of something, definitely drop those in at any time. And any kind of support. Like what kind of support do you need from myself, Tara, during this process? We'd like to know. You can either send us a note on that, or you could just drop it in the chat. Anything like around those lines, we'd like to know so that we can be able to, so that we can be here for you and help meet your needs as you're helping meet your students and staffs and school community needs. Tara, do you have anything to add for this part?
Nope. Moral of the big message now, I think we said it 3 times, is like, please ask. We don't want you to end this competition and say like, I didn't understand this, or people didn't give me support. Like we are hoping to kind of provide every support that you need. So.
Okay, so the investment part of the rubric, let's look at the empowering category because that's where we're all going to be. So you're going to create an action plan detailing who is responsible and a deadline for each task and why they're doing it. So what is your why? So on this part, what we noticed a lot is people would put, they would put what you were doing, but you didn't say the who connected to that and a deadline for the task. Some of you are doing things that are like you're starting it this school year, knowing that it's really for next school year. So that timeline, it's fine that you go into the next school year. Like that's completely fine. Some of you are not even starting your actual plan until August of next school year. That's fine too. And maybe you don't know, maybe that position might have a transition. Put the actual position of the person that's going to be responsible, even if you don't have a name. So I might not put Tara, but I might put, it may be the assistant principal that's going to handle this piece of it, or our director of, we used to have school and community resource specialists that were social workers. So I might put that position is responsible for that, even if that person might be transitioning out of that space. So definitely connect each line of your action item to a person and then put a why. We're doing this because. So for each thing in your action item, we should be able to see like, why are you doing that? Or like, why is that important? And then the next one, outline a communication. Go ahead.
I'm gonna throw this on there also around like what an action plan is. If you did our design sessions with us, we've used the words around prototyping. I'm going to talk about what prototypes you could use later. But the other thing around the action plan is picture it as like 2 different action plans. The first being, how do we build out and test that prototype? How do we work together with our team to make kind of our rough draft versions of our solution so that we can start getting them in front of students and teachers and parents to test them? And then down the road, as Ashley said, like there's a whole second set of these action plans that we want you to start thinking of that would be like, once we know the solution, we're going to start implementing it. And so, we want there to be a combination of you showing us that there's both thinking around building out a prototype that is that rough draft. We don't want that. We want you to practice that design mindset of building a culture of prototyping, which means that you're testing things before making final decisions. But ultimately, we know that you have to make final decisions, and you want to be implementing these, either this school year, summer, or next school year. So that's where you want to pair them together. And again, like the why of building out that prototype should be, we want to meet the student or parent needs better. And so just helping us see the connection of we're testing these out with these students in a short cycle, then we're gonna, gonna make iterations and improve them. And then we have a final product that we're implementing. So again, action planning can be all of those, including, like all of those activities together.
Yes, absolutely. And so just like she was saying, you can even say, we're going to circle back to our priority group and we're going to ask them some questions. And beside it, you put, it's going to be our design team. So that is a who that you're connected to, the what you're doing, and why we're going to circle back is so that we can get their feedback to make sure we're still headed in the right direction, or as we get more specific about what we're doing. So we're looking for all that, like sometimes the action is to figure out our next action. And that's what you're going to put in as part of your action plan. And along with that, you'll see that we paired a communication plan right next to it, but it's not that you have to communicate every action. So they're together on the same board, but they're kind of detached, because you're not going to communicate. There's some things you're just going to do where you don't need to have a whole full communication plan about. And then there are other times that you are going to need to send out some emails. You're going to need to have a flyer. You're going to need to tell people what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. So what we noticed is that part that was missing is the why. For this section, as we were looking through those, like, how is that, like, what are you hoping that this does for you in communicating to this group? Are you trying to get staff buy-in? Are you trying to let your parents, your community be aware of what's coming? So like, how is that going to help you out with this, move this idea forward? Terry, do you have something on that box?
Yeah, just again, like the same point around yesterday, we ended the conversations around empathy of like making sure that you let your people you've interviewed or observed know like what next steps are. Those are types of ways that we wanted to see that you're communicating. Like you're interviewing your this priority group of students, letting them know like, hey, this is what we're building based on what we heard from you. So helping them see, the users see that you're actually attempting to solve the identified theory of change based on what you heard from them. So those are types of things. And also, again, like you're going to host a new model for a parent engagement strategy. How are you telling people about that and why you're doing it? Those are different like communication efforts that we want to just be able to see that are happening.
Jeff, you had a question?
Yeah, so I'm curious that what I like about these things is that there's other schools doing God knows what, right? And some may be similar to what we are working on at my school. Others might be just cool ideas I'd love to walk away with. Are we approaching this also as opportunities to share these ideas, or should we be more focused on we just want to win? Like I didn't know what the point of this was. Is it just, obviously I love the idea of having the time to plan and really think out a strategy for my own school, but then I always want to share ideas. I'm just curious to get your viewpoint on that. So
it's twofold. You're doing it because you want to win, but as you want to win, you're coming up with great things as well, because that's why the artifacts that you all are creating will be shared amongst the group. So people have come up with great applications, lesson plan templates. Like there's been some phenomenal things that I actually wish I had in my toolbox. We will be putting together that toolkit and sharing it with everyone. The plans and different things like that, like these are after the competition. These are things that we'll want to share amongst our schools, because it's like, we can't just come up with these amazing resources and then and just keep them siloed, right? The whole point is that we all want to get better. Again, another way that we all win is that you're going to have access to those tools and templates as well. So the outline and communication plan, yes, as judges, we need to understand what you're doing, but it's more so too for you to have a timeline that's mapped and very clear as you move through this process about like what you're doing, how you're doing it, so that you can duplicate your success or spread that as well.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Jeff, and also say that your mural boards will not be shared. So that is a workspace for your team and the judges will see that, but I don't think the fund has any plans to like publicize that. So as far as like you're communicating with the judges, if there's private work, if there's work that you only want your team to see, please, like that is like your space. None of the other teams can see your mural board. The other thing being is that we have a plan to record your pitches on the day on April 8th. So both cohorts. So like the track 1 who's going for the $4,000 and the track 2. And we also hope that there's a spirit of collegiality between the schools, and that all of the schools are invited to see the top five finalists go at the end of the April 8th event. So even though they're different time blocks, you might sign off and say, well, I've done my time, or you can actually sign on, stay on and be able to see your peers present their ideas and learn from that.
It's a good question though. And yes, to reiterate what Tara and Ashley just said, I think there are things that we want to do when we share the agenda for the April 8th pitch day so that schools can hear from, at minimum, the finalist schools will be presenting. And after the challenge, what we plan to do, provided every school team opts in to this, is sharing a recording of the pitch you presented, a summary that our team will write about the prototype each school developed and any artifacts that you created. We want to make a portfolio of this, have it housed on our website so any school can like learn more about it, access it, and we can figure out ways to continue to build like a learning community from the work that results from this challenge.
Cool.
Did we answer your question, Jeff? Okay, cool. And then the last part of this box is having a prototype, a start and end date, articulating how you're going to bring the design team together for review, feedback, and planning next steps, which is probably going to be mixed into your communication plan and into the prototype process. So there'll be multiple places that this will take place, and has a plan to incorporate the students that were interviewed or other students that are part of the priority user group for the next round of testing. So just like Tara said before, talk about how like you're going to go back to that group and just make sure that like, okay, what do you guys think about this? Where are we at on this process? Like that circling back is really important. It's not just like we used you and we're moving on. So it's that important piece to kind of go back and say, either to that, not to this, you doesn't have to be back to the same people. Because again, some of you are spanning 2 school years. So you may not be able to go back to that same group of students, but students that represent your priority group of students. Tara?
And that's, again, if you recall from the design sessions that we did with you, for those of you who were able to participate in a half or a full day, think of it as you've identified your group and you've identified through your empathy work, your theory of change or your design challenge. By identifying that design challenge, you're saying, here's my hypothesis. I'm going to build this prototype in the hopes that I'm solving this design challenge. And so the whole spirit of that culture of prototyping is saying, I'm not making decisions in isolation. My team is actually trying to say, we're going to solve for that design challenge. And the only way that we know is if we continue to empower and engage those users throughout the process. So that is like, we're encouraging you to go back to them for everything Ashley said, and because we want to make sure that you're solving the challenge you set out to solve.
For the impact part of the rubric, measures for success. So we're going to talk a little bit more about measures for success in just a second. We'll break that down a little bit more. We've gotten a little bit more clear on how to write these based on what we were seeing, just to make sure that we're really aligned in the parts that should be included in your measures for success, and demonstrate how you're going to check assumptions about what will happen, about like, here's my perspective and here's what I thought would happen. Here's what actually happened, and what lens am I using to view this? And are there other lenses that I can then add, equitable lenses to view how I'm viewing what I said I wanted to do? So it's just checking those assumptions at the door. Sometimes you'll hear it in my pitch process that when I started first hearing from students that saying they didn't feel like they belonged in our school community, I thought one way, because I was like, oh, you don't belong, it's because you're not involved, and that was like the automatic assumption I made. You don't belong because you're not involved. And some of our students who said that were students that were involved. So I definitely had to check that. I was like, wow, you are in all these clubs and activities and you still don't feel like you belong. Something else is happening here. My own assumption of me thinking that students who don't feel like they could belong aren't involved, that equation wasn't a thing. It was an equation in my head, and I had to really check that assumption before moving on. So it's about telling like, what other lenses are you going to use? How are you going to gain some of these other perspectives as you're going through these measurement pieces, and not just using some of the same standard measurements that are in education, like your grades and some of these other pieces of it.
And I really want to encourage you all there. We'll send out, and Esther, I'll find this and we can put this on our board too. Stanford D School built out this concept with IDEO called uncommon measures. And this is where it's like the things that you don't realize that are happening as micro shifts in behavior that you could actually identify as they're starting to trend towards solving your design challenge. So an example of students smile when they walk through the front door. That could be a measure of success that you could put in here that would be indicative that the culture of your school has shifted. The students who they used to not raise their hand, they're actually leaning in when they're listening to their teachers, and maybe they're participating more. So those types of, again, Ashley, we already have in our back pocket the attendance and tardy and referrals and grades, all of the common measures that we know. And so helping play with your team around, are there uncommon measures that you might want to start looking for as part of your prototype testing? And again, you will get points as long as you can articulate that this is what you're looking for this reason. So that you kind of, again, leave the breadcrumbs for the judges to be able to understand your thinking.
And then the next one being an artifact, which is a tool or template, which we'll dig into some more later today. And then the last box being clear examples of how the artifact can be leveraged by other leaders, other schools. So how can other educators use what you've created? So that being like kind of how like artifact itself, the creation of it, and the utilization of it is another piece of it. I think, I saw a hand. Jeff, did you have a question?
I don't think we
lowered. Oh, okay. I saw the hand up, but I didn't know if it was a new hand or the
lower. Yep.
Okay, you're good. Tara, did you have anything on that part?
Nope, we'll talk about artifacts in a sec.
Okay. So here's a way to create outcomes, and I'll put this, send it out in your email, and we'll also talk about it when we meet one-on-one. But here's a nice way to create outcomes. It's who's going to benefit from the outcome, what is the result that you expect to be achieved, like by when will it occur, how much will be done or accomplished. You can give a quantitative or qualitative target, and how will we know the result was achieved. So an example of by June 2017, 80% of the place teachers will be rated as strong or exemplary by their principals as measured by an internal principal survey instrument. So that is a classic, using classic tools of ways that we do that. But like Tara said, you can say that we're gonna have, students are gonna lean in, 80% of the students are gonna start leaning in, or it's returning their surveys, or you'll hear like belly laughs in 50% of your classes so like this can also, like the ways that we're saying to write these just kind of gives you a pattern to follow, so that like our outcomes are kind of normed on a certain stance. And in the example we came up with, you'll see how we've used this, but we'll also make sure that we get you this information and get you these ways of how to write out outcomes. I think that'll help, because some of them, they were all over the place, but I think that just making sure we have these components will help you also make sure that you know, okay, here's some benchmarks that I can put in for my own self of things that we can look at to know it's time to circle back to that priority group, or like this works on our timeline as well. So you just kind of take your timeline, take some of those dates, and then create your outcomes in the 4 different categories, which these are the categories that we have set: connections, content and capacity, culture and climate, and communication. And so really when we talk about this, we saw there were I got a lot of questions on these, and the people that had coaching calls before the application. So I just wanted to say it to the group of everyone. Connections is about who, the content, capacity building, that's all about the what. Communication is about the how, and culture and climate is about the why. So just really, when we do things, they can cross categories. So we're not necessarily connected, like worried about how many categories you have, but we just want to make sure that you have some of your categories represented here, one of the 4. So if you're doing something on empathy work, you can easily put that in a connections category. If you're doing something that happens to do with, like, we want our students to experience this kind of curriculum or have this kind of exploration or do inquiry lessons, you might put that in content. So these are why we're doing the 4 different components and 4 categories of the elements of the outcomes. Tara, did you have anything for that piece? Okay.
Good. Okay, so these, I just wanted to share these real quickly. You'll get this recording and slide deck. You've probably seen these slides before. It's just articulating what we mean when we say prototype. So the prototyping is that experimental model of your proposed solution. So this is where you're building I call it a rough draft too. Like you're building out, like, we think this is important based on our design challenge. We're going to build this solution, and we're not going to finalize the solution until we test it. And you can test it a few different times, right? You're going to put it back in front of students. They like it, they don't like it, they have questions about it. And so then you make some changes in response to that feedback, and then you have a next round prototype. And wanted just to separate the prototypes from the artifacts. And so when there is space on the board, actually, can you pull up your board, your mural board? Wanted to show that there's a space for your prototype and describing your prototype, and then going to your artifacts, which are really those materials, those tools, the meeting agendas, the things that you can actually scale to let other people, as Jeff said, let other people learn from your work. So this is the mural board, and you'll see that, you know, if you've done this in the past from another design session, you can describe your prototype here. You can also describe the prototype version that you're on now. If you've already, you're already on round 2 or 3 prototyping because you've gotten feedback, put this information here. And again, you can drop images in to show what the prototypes are. And so this is where you're describing it. What is a prototype? Is it, I'm going back to one of the applications I reviewed, that it was around developing a cultural literacy or lesson plan. If that is the template that you're doing to solve your design challenge, describing that in this section. And then, as Ashley said, right next to that is your action plan of what are you going to do with this prototype. Round 1, for this period of time, we're testing this prototype, and then we're going to start implementing it. So that's what that investment section is. And then we've been talking about artifacts, which is the next section, stage 9. And that's where we say, like, if someone were to want to run with my idea at their school, these are the types of things that they could use. So there's a list of underneath, in that gray box, there's a list of what artifacts might be. These are literal things that you and your team have built and used that you could share to help lift up and build out your prototype. So again, prototype is a rough draft. Artifacts are maybe things you've used as part of your prototype, but these are more of like your final or closer to implementation drafts. And again, you might not have tons of artifacts if you're still in the prototyping phase, but just sharing with us the tools that you have actually built to be even able to test your prototype will be helpful here.
I just wanted to go up to this other piece on the budget here. Tara, did you want to say something about the budget? I know you have a note here.
Sure. Yeah, the budget is just, it's there so that your team's imagining in a world that you get the $10,000. How might that money be supportive for your idea, right? Like, we're not asking for an itemized budget, but if you are able to get funding, while it's no strings attached funding, we just want to see some of your thinking about how you might use that money to support your plan in your school. And with that, Miss Ashley is going to lead us in a little bit more of a deep dive on the pitch, both how to do one, and then also we'll go over how to use the mural board for that.
Can you put up that slide again that was about prototype?
Yes. Hold on. Let me find out what computer it's on. Okay, so while I'm looking for the prototype slide, when we talk about the pitch process, again, we're looking that people who don't know what you're doing can understand the pitch that you're talking about, what you want to do, why you want to do it. And let me put up this slide real quick. Sorry, I'm using 2 computers, so sometimes I have to bounce back between the 2.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so as we talk about the pitch process, and some things that you're going to want to keep in mind when you do your pitch. Let me just give a few tips. So I've done some pitch competitions before, just for fun. I pitched to a tech company because I had an app that I wanted to create, and it sounded like a really fun process. So I went through that. I'm getting ready to do a screenwriting pitch so I have all these pitch processes and things that I do on the side because I find them enjoyable and fun, and I'm always challenging myself. So there's some tips that we're going to do because your pitch is going to be 5 minutes long. And usually they have like a counter that happens on your screen or on your computer, so you know your pitch is 5 minutes. I highly recommend some kind of a timer because you can use your phone or different things like that, but I use a timer and it has big numbers on it so that when I get ready to like do I can keep track of where I'm at on my time, because I just glance down and look at it. Also, in a 5-minute pitch, you really don't have time to like go into detail. So you're trying to think of like, what are the highlights of the story that I can tell where I'm still giving enough of what needs to be said, but I'm not going like too deep or taking too many minutes on any one slide. I think it boils down to being able to have like maybe 30 seconds a slide, along with the intro and then an outro that you're having. That's why we recommend only one person does the pitch, because it's hard to bounce back and forth between people. Like, okay, that's you're like, it wastes time to bounce back and forth between people. A lot of people memorize their pitch. For my screenwriting competition, I will be memorizing my pitch. The slides are there not for the audience. My slides are there to help me. They help to remind me of what to say, because we're not necessarily grading like the content of your slides, because that happens in your mural. We're grading like, are you communicating the appropriate things for what should be on that slide? So use the slides as you see fit. Mine, you have some pictures because the pictures jog my memory about what I'm supposed to say. So they don't necessarily like if I told you to download my slide, you wouldn't be able to give the same pitch at all. You wouldn't get any information from it. So just keep in mind that that's how it works. Let's head back over to Mural, because I want to show a note that's there that Tara has about the presentations. And I think that'll help make it really clear.
And again, this is the program will take some practice, and that's why we put some hints on there. And also just like know that it's not, there will be a need for you to practice your beginner's mindset, and just like know that you're not an expert in this, and that's okay.
Yes. My pitch today will not be perfect at all, because I just now created these slides, and you can see that 2 of them aren't even done yet. So yeah, that should be interesting. Okay, so presentation tips. There's 2 ways that you can choose to do this. I just used the slides that were there and just took text boxes and different things to cover up what I wanted to put there. You also could, if you wanted to, make the slides in Canva, PowerPoint, whatever program you're more comfortable in, as long as this slide talks about, like, this one has your title, name of your school, and your name. Like, it doesn't matter, like, and these are on here, school name, I just covered this up with a text box. This is our opportunity. So as long as slide number 2 talks about our opportunity, you can go create them somewhere else and then just cover it up. Like, just make a picture. If I say I wanted to this was my slide, I would just make this the picture, the width of this, and just put it there on top. I would probably make it a little bit bigger.
So you can take screenshots of your other slides and drop them on here.
Yes. Okay, and then, so when you're ready to present, you're going to share your screen just like I did. You're going to click on outline, which is up here at the top. It's this, it looks like a little to-do list at the top. I'm going to open up this outline. Right here, click on presentation mode icon. So right at the upper right-hand corner, I'm going to click on that. And go over here. When you open your outline, it says title beginning. I'm going to click on title beginning, and then it fills my screen. So when I click on the next one, our opportunity, it's just going to take me to the next slide. And this is how you're going to present your information.
The other way to do it is actually to go back to the title slide, Ashley, and you can close the outline if you don't want to use it. So go ahead and exit out, and then you can use your arrow keys. Your right and left arrow keys take you between slides also. So again, practicing those, using that little hint, practicing those ways to use these as slides.
Okay, it stopped working after the first time. Hold on. Let me go back to my title. Let me close this.
Jeff, do you have a question while she's figuring that out?
Yeah, I do. So we're all using the same slides also? The same style?
The same content. So that's where Ashley's saying, like, we built a template so that, you know, with every single pitch, there's going to be like the 10 slides that has those sequence of information. But if you want to build them differently, like you have a different aesthetic or whatnot, then bring them then and like screenshot them and cover these in Mural, then you can use your own, whatever design you'd like. But we just wanted to help, for equity's sake, make sure that everyone has the same opportunity to present that information.
Thank you.
And again, so like when you put your slide over here, when you click on title, it'll still take you there. Even though it'll be your slide, it'll still take you to the right spot because we have it's like noted by like area on the board. And so Tara, I think they might work better on the laptop. On the desktop, I'm having a hard time doing the arrows over, so I have to keep my outline open. Okay.
Well, as you practice, if there are like major tech issues, please know that we are happy to help. And if you can't figure something out, or if it's just not working, like that's where you just like shoot us an email as quickly as you can so that we can kind of help triage any support that you might need as you start getting into this pitch deck.
Okay, I am going to set my time, not because I'm going to take the whole 5 minutes and do a whole entire pitch, but just so I can tell you where I'm at on time by the time I get through presenting some of this information. We could talk about how I did, what your feedback would be, and that from Tara and from Amir and Esther, who are also part of like knowing what this rubric looks like for presentation wise, just to give feedback so you can hear feedback, and then we'll take any questions. All right, so here we go. Hi, my name is Ashley Smith, and I'm from North Kansas City High School, where I'm assistant principal. We have 5 people from our team that are part of our design team, and we created Mentor Lab. Mentor Lab is all about a student-on-student mentoring program, and we are so excited to share it with you here today. So our opportunity is we have amazing students at our school that are super involved in everything. And so we had a group of senior students that are pictured there. Actually, the football team came to me and said, we don't have, our freshmen aren't eligible. Like there are not enough freshmen on our team that our football team won't survive if we don't keep getting underclassmen. We had the same thing happen with our dance squad and our student leadership team, which is featured in the front on that left-hand picture. So they all came to me and they're saying, we don't have enough students that are like to fill the ranks, meaning our clubs are dwindling down. So we saw this as a huge opportunity, but we also looked at our freshman grades and we realized based on our criteria for being involved, we didn't have a whole huge group of freshmen that had the grades, attendance, and everything that they needed to be able to move forward in some of our sports and activities. So we saw that as a huge opportunity for our school. So we ended up talking to our theory of change. Our theory of change that we use was our freshman students will experience a sense of connection and belonging in order to raise their attendance and decrease discipline infractions so that they can achieve at their highest level. And so the next thing is that we talked to a lot of students, mostly freshman students, and we talked to them during lunch, but we focused on 15 students. Each member of our team interviewed 3 people. And we saw that they thought it was very different than middle school, and they really didn't understand how to get help. The grades are low, but they were eligible for second semester activities because they didn't understand eligibility at all, like that you had to be eligible. They didn't have that in middle school. And they found it really hard to make friends, especially in this era of like COVID, and they just were having a hard time connecting with one another. So we thought, how might we create spaces for students to have their learning and social needs met in a small group setting by other students? So our plan is to create a mentoring program for students by students. So 9th and 10th grade students are going to be mentored by 11th and 12th grade students, and there will be an application process, but really anybody can apply and be a part of it. We just do the application process so we understand what they're wanting out of this process and to help them think through their own, where they are. They're going to be matched up in groups by people who like the arts, people who want to focus on academics, people who want to focus on athletics, and people who want to focus on activities, because we have a ton to offer at our school. And as you can see, all of our juniors and seniors have to do community service hours. So we're also counting this for our junior and senior students. This will be what they get. We're going to measure success by April 22. We want 100% of the match students to log 3 hours of mentoring signed off by a supervising teacher. By May 22, we want 100% of the students and adults participating to return surveys. We have a hard time getting our surveys returns. So we feel like if you're plugged in there, you're actually going to return the survey. And by August of 22, we want to be able to know who our next team of mentors are going to be. Our artifacts that we came up with are, we have an application for underclassmen to be, this is our application that we used. And then we have an application for our upper school students. Our artifact benefits all kind of people, because we want to see what, we want to be able to know what students want to be connected by, what's important to them. And we'll feel that we'll be able to help you figure that out in your schools. We also want to help other students, like as they think through what's important to them. Some of them don't know. And so we feel that that would be a great time for them. And we also created it for our other adult sponsors who are also helping us out in this process. Okay, that's where I'm going to stop. I had 2 slides. We're going to use the funds by, and here's just a sample budget that I created, which is really fake because I really don't even know what I would use the funds for. And then what we learned through what you learned through this process. I had 45 seconds left to talk about the money and what we learned, and to say, imagine a world where mentors exist. Thank you. So that I would have had enough time to get those 3 slides into where I was at. I will stop sharing and get my feedback from Tara, Esther, Amir.
I really felt the why was super clear, of like why these students were being supported and where you got your idea from, like that it was connected to what students came to you and asked for. Like I liked that there was a through line of what they said and what you were able to build for them.
Yes, I appreciated the connection to the underserved students and making sure that the program you designed was responsive to those students' needs in particular. I wonder if another version of what you might consider when you talk about survey completion rates is how you'll use that data to inform like the next iteration of the mentoring program.
Totally forgot to tell you what I was talking about on my survey, right? Like what it was, why I was doing it. There was no kind of mention of like like a little bit of a timeline there. So I wish I'd said something about that as well. Amir, is he on here?
Yeah, no, I was going to say I really appreciated how it was clear why you were speaking to the students and how you approach them. I think that it gives a very clear understanding of from the beginning to the end of why you're doing, and it informed clearly your theory of change.
Yeah, I will tell you guys, if I were to do it again, I probably would be a little bit more clear on some of like the emotional piece that was missing, of just not just my numbers, but like the heart piece and the connection and some of the things that like my adults felt when we interviewed students and what we heard from them, how it impacted the teachers who first of all thought about it as one more thing on their plate, who changed their mentality to thinking as being a sponsor of a mentor was like the best thing that they've ever done. And they love their job so much more because of being connected to this program. So I would have talked a little bit about that emotional components from the adults side that was involved, as well as some of the impact that we have had as we were starting to see some of that happen in our school, this mentoring program come to light. So those are some things that I probably would have added had I practiced and not just did it just now.
So like having a balcony perspective of what Ashley just shared, she modeled how to use the slides and also just how to verbally speak in a really compelling way. And she, I don't know if you caught this, she also snuck in a bunch more details about her idea through the questions or the feedback that we gave. So that's another thing. All schools will have 10 minutes. We're going to cut it off at 10 minutes. So within that 10 minutes, you have 5 minutes to do your pitch, like Ashley did, really concisely, going through her slides and making the case. And you also have 5 minutes of Q&A. So making sure whoever is your presenter, or if there's another person on your team who's going to field all the questions and answers, those are opportunities to be able to like pepper in a little bit more detail, a little more of that compelling storytelling. And you're wanting to be concise so you can have the judges ask as many more questions or give more feedback, but then just know that you do have a little bit more time after that first pitch to be able to kind of like still make your case through the questions and answers that people are the feedback that they're giving you.
Yes. And I will say that's like one of the questions that we have for everybody to ask, or do you, like, if you have time, is any last words? So that is your time to just then say, oh, let me tell you about a little bit about the adults. Our adults really were connected to this project. Like that would be the time for me to then say that within my allotment of time. So Jeff, I saw your hands.
Yeah, so sorry to ask so many questions. I just want to
No, you're good. No, this is that time to do that.
So each group is limited to these 11 slides, you're saying? Like each one should be titled the same. Whatever we do with it is our own, but like you're saying that we have 11 slides using these titles to do our pitch.
Not necessarily. I don't think it's about using the titles, it's using the content, right? Like you got to talk about money. You need to talk about the opportunity.
Okay, so those are that's just like a model.
That's a model. The words and the stuff is a model. So I mean, I easily could have called it budget versus use the funds for, or we learned, but those are like sentence starters that let you know what you need to the content that you need to kind of deliver, just to make sure you're on track with delivering what our judges need to hear for their rubric.
Yep.
So you actually don't have to use any of those things or anything, but again, at your own risk, right? Like we know that that rubric is set up in a certain way that this hits those components. But if you don't want to say anything, like usually on a pitch, you could say whatever you want to say on a pitch. You're 5 minutes. But again, we just want to make sure we just design something that will give you an outline to follow so you can make sure that you're hitting the talking points.
And that outline follows the mural board.
Yeah.
And so if you've done those different steps on the mural board, we're hoping that it's a pretty easy jump to be able to put those into that template to be able to do your pitch. Like it's not new content, it's just a different part of the board that you can then make more compelling and have it in a shorter amount of time.
Yeah, because I would have just had to like either copy my artifacts over, copy my measures of success, copy, like I'm just really going over there, Control C, Control V. It's like, because copy, paste is really all that you're doing to create this deck. We just wanted it put in one spot so you weren't like zooming. It's hard to kind of zoom all over the mural board as someone was talking about presentation, and we wanted it to go in a sequential way that worked.
Well, we could also, if we cut and do screenshots and put our 11 slides or whatever it might be in there, can we do present mode if we're more comfortable with that, and then we're actually out of Mural, but we're presenting our screen. It might be Google Slides, it might be Canva, or like what it. Does
Esther,
that make
your
sense?
call. This is Esther's call. Esther and Amir, your calls on that.
Yeah, the reason why we wanted to be consistent is we don't want like any glitches on the tech, because the judges will be hearing the pitches. Originally, we thought through Mural, and that's what they'll be using to determine the winners once you're in that finalist or semi-finalist bracket. Jeff, let me confer with the rest of our team, just because we want it to be fair for every school, and standardize where it makes sense, and be flexible where it makes sense too. So we'll get back to you on an update and the whole group on that.
Well, we can send out an email so that everybody gets it at the same time. And then as we talk about coaching calls, we can reiterate that again.
Nicole, you have a question.
Hi, yes. I had to step away for a moment. My apologies if I may have missed this already, but can more than one person on the design team contribute to the pitch? Or does it only have to be the leader of the design project giving the pitch?
So we would recommend that I would say pick the best presenter on your team. So the person who's most excited, who maybe has done these types of presentations before. And if not, like there's also this consideration of who's the most excited about your idea. It may be the school leader, it might be someone else on your team that is just like, I can sell this idea because I care so much about it. You can have more than one presenter, but as Ashley said, because there's so much information and only 5 minutes, it might be cumbersome to be switching people. There's always that like transition of like, who's gonna take over. So like, that's up to you as a team. And if you do have more than one person, just practice. I would say the Q&A could be a time to involve other parts of your team as like people who might respond to some questions, so that they're involved. But again, it's all about like just trying to figure out who's going to be able to be more concise and then give them that assignment so they can kind of practice and memorize what words they're going to say during that time.
Yeah. So if Tara and I were in the same room, we could sit next to each other and then be like I could hit her on her leg, like your turn, my turn. Like, so that would be probably more conducive to then versus trying to, if we weren't in the same room and then I'm cutting her off because I'm like, she went over her, she's 10 seconds over. We were supposed to be off of that slide. Like, we can't necessarily do that separate room. So I don't, however you do it, if we practice it, we might be able to do it seamlessly and stay within our 5 minutes. So I think it's just that's just one thing that you practice, like Tara said, we'll be able to get it. But it's something to consider.
Yep. And it doesn't have, the point I also heard, Nicole, is like, it does not have to be you just because you signed your team up for this. It can be anybody on your team who does the presentation.
Absolutely. Because Tara signed us up for this, but I had to do the pitch. And I've dropped my link into, if you haven't scheduled your coaching call, make sure you do that today. Just so you make sure we get you in there so you can get your feedback from your application and we can answer any questions one-on-one you have about your specific project as we move forward, and to make sure that your team is good to go. So I saw most of you have already done that. So make sure you click the link and schedule it if you haven't. I dropped it in the chat so you have it one more time.
And again, that is also another space for you to get your personalized support. So it can be just one person, it could be your whole team, but the goal there is to literally, if there is questions you have about how to use Mural, how do you put Post-its on, like anything of that, all the way to, I've got this prototype, how can I like move it to the next level? So there's kind of like, it's an open space for you to get one-on-one attention with one of the, like Ashley or I. And so just please make sure you schedule that so that you can feel supported going into the April 8th. We have a few
Any
minutes.
other
left.
questions?
Yeah. Okay.
I know sometimes it'll come later, so
Yeah.
want to reinforce the coaching calls, send me an email if any of the questions come up. Something we'll commit to doing is we're going to share the decks that we use for both webinars as well as recordings for both webinars by end of day Thursday, by end of day tomorrow. So you can be able to share that with the rest of your team and with you as needed. Again, the coaching calls should be happening, be scheduled by the end of this week. We encourage folks to just protect that time. And we'll get back to you about the pitch template that we're going to be, what is going to be required and what's not. We'll make sure we get that information to you by Monday.
Yep. And I'll just drop, Jeff was making a little note catcher for some of the things that we went over today. So that link is what he built for you all to see. Thank you for doing that.
Absolutely.
So as people are starting to sign off, let's do another one-word checkout like you did the song title before. If you want to just drop a word in, kind of how you're feeling right now, that could give us a good read on going into those coaching calls and how you're feeling right now. So one-word checkout, you don't need to justify it, just the one word, drop it in the chat box, and then you're on your way to the rest of your day. Thank you.
You.
Put some music back.